Good morning for teleSUR. I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. As we come on the air this morning, the U.S.-led coalition against the Islamic State is meeting in Paris to discuss military escalation in Iraq and Syria. The conference brings together NATO and Middle East countries. On his way to Paris, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry called the mounting military support encouraging. On Monday, France announced its first military spy flights over Iraq. Paris previously said it was ready to join U.S. airstrikes against the Islamic State. And momentum continues to build for the latest U.S. intervention in the Middle East. Australia has committed 600 troops to the U.S. mission. UK Prime Minister David Cameron also offered his strongest indication yet of increased British participation. Cameron says the UK will offer whatever needed to stop ISIS.
This is not about British combat troops on the ground. It is about working with others to extinguish this terrorist threat. As this strategy intensifies, we are ready to take whatever steps are necessary to deal with this threat and keep our country safe.
Meanwhile, Russia says any airstrikes in Syria without the consent of the Syrian government would constitute an act of aggression. Syrian officials say any action against ISIS there without coordination with Syria will fail. In reference to support of extremist groups from some Middle East nations, Syrian Deputy Foreign Minister Faisal Mekdad said, quote, "You cannot fight terrorism when you collaborate with those who created these terror groups, including in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and others," end quote. His remarks follow military and financial backing from the U.S. and its Arab allies to extremist groups seeking to oust the Syrian government. There are fears much of those resources are now in the hands of ISIL. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Rafael Ramirez criticized U.S. interference in foreign countries. He made the remarks in reference to the conference underway in Paris discussing military action in Iraq and Syria.
Mandan grupos de poder, mandan allá en los Estados.
In the U.S., there are very powerful lobbies that are capable of unleashing a war like this within a matter of hours. For them, there is no international law, no limits, no conventions. There's nothing other than what they decide to do against other countries.
No hay fronteras, no hay convenciones, no hay nada, sino que deciden.
They decide to apply their extraterritorial law. They decide to use torture, as they themselves have admitted. That's an ongoing course of action. Kidnap, torture. It makes for a very, very dangerous situation.
Argentina announced Sunday that it will pay holders of its sovereign debt this week. Finance Minister Axel Kicillof told national radio that once debt holders were paid, there could be no more talk of the country being in default. Argentina's Congress passed a bill last week to enable the government to resume debt payments in defiance of a U.S. court ruling that had prevented them. Some considered it a win for the so-called vulture funds. Ahead of the UN Climate Summit in New York next week, Brazil has announced it will construct a giant climate monitoring tower in the heart of the Amazon. The Amazon Observatory is expected to rise 325 meters from the ground. Brazilian scientists hope to use the data to better understand sources of greenhouse gases and answer questions on climate change. The Amazon jungle is one of the world's most sensitive ecosystems and has a powerful influence on the intake and release of carbon into the atmosphere. And staying with Latin America, 5 Central American nations will celebrate 193 years of independence on Monday. The list includes Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. On this day in 1821, Central American leaders accepted a plan declaring the 5 nations free from Spain. Events were held over the weekend celebrating this freedom. In Honduras, representatives of the National Resistance Front are demonstrating in the capital city, demanding a true independence process from the current government. The current administration came to power in the aftermath of a 2009 coup. Although the ceasefire in Ukraine is still largely holding, intense fighting around the airport of Donetsk broke out on Sunday. Both sides of the conflict continue to trade accusations of violating the ceasefire. According to the leader of the separatist rebels, at least 20 civilians were killed when Ukrainian forces bombed Donetsk on Sunday. He added that the rebels had no plans to fight back. Despite the ceasefire, Western powers have stepped up sanctions on Russia. On Monday, Moscow announced an emergency fund to help affected Russian companies. And meanwhile, Ukrainian Defense Minister Valery Helite warned that Ukraine will restart its nuclear weapons program if military support from NATO is unsatisfactory. He also confirmed that NATO weapons are on the way to Ukraine.
We were reaching agreements in closed talks without media about those things, about those weapons that we currently need. But please understand me, I have no right to disclose any specific country we reached that agreement with. But the fact is that those weapons are already on their way to us. That's absolutely true, I can officially tell you.
Gazan school children on Sunday walked between piles of rubble as they returned to their classrooms for the first time since the Israeli attacks. Israel targeted over 200 school buildings during the recent attacks. Some 50,000 Gazans whose homes have been destroyed are still housed in UN-run school buildings. The first week of school will focus on psychological care for many children, many of them still traumatized. Hundreds of school children were killed during the attacks. Campaigners both for and against Scottish independence are scrambling for votes in the final week of campaigning ahead of a historic referendum on Thursday. Some polls over the weekend put the Yes campaign 8 points ahead, while others show the No campaign ahead by a similar margin. Over 90% of the population is now registered to vote, and huge voter turnout is expected. On Sunday, the Queen sparked controversy by saying Scottish voters should think very carefully about the vote. Some interpreted the comments as an attempt to intervene in the campaign. And we end this morning in Hollywood, where stars turned out at a Los Angeles Movie Awards ceremony, but not for Hollywood. They were there for Nollywood, celebrating Nigeria's booming film industry. The Nollywood and African Film Critics Award saw the stars of the Nigerian film come out in force. The Nigerian film industry has exploded in recent years, becoming Nigeria's second largest employer. The industry produces about twice as many professional films as Hollywood each year. The industry hopes to continue earning worldwide recognition. Almost 20 million people regularly watch Nollywood films around the world. Plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For teleSUR English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great Monday.